So we will continue our discussion from the previous class, okay, means yesterday's class. We were discussing about converging nozzles and what is the effect of back pressure on the flow through nozzles. Okay, and we had seen a few cases starting with back pressure equal to the pressure which is on the other side, means on the reservoir side, in which case there is no flow, which we have seen like this. Okay, so the pressure remains same and there is no flow at all. This is corresponding to this point. And then if the pressure is slightly lowered at the back end side, means at the exit side, what happens? So this was the case B, and which corresponds to something like this. So there will be some increase in mass flow rate, and the PB by P0 or back pressure by stagnation pressure ratio will be slightly lower. Then if we keep on decreasing the back pressure, we would reach at some point we will reach sonic velocity at the exit section, and at that point we will call that the nozzle is choked and the back pressure becomes equal to the critical pressure P star. Okay, this is the point at which it will occur, and at this point the maximum mass flow rate will become maximum. The mass flow rate cannot be increased any further. So up to this point the mass flow rate was increasing, we were going in this direction, mass flow rate was increasing, but at this point the mass flow rate becomes maximum and we cannot increase the mass flow rate any further by decreasing the pressure on the right hand side. If we keep on decreasing the pressure now to say less than P star like this, so no change will occur within the nozzle. So within the nozzle flow will remain same, pressure will remain same. And outside the nozzle there will be a sudden jump which we call as shock. Okay. And if even if we have vacuum at the end, then also within the nozzle there won't be any change. Then outside the nozzle there will be a bigger jump. So a bigger shock will be there outside the nozzle. So this is the behavior of a converging nozzle. Same thing will hold true if you keep on increasing the pressure on the left hand side. Ultimately it's the matter of pressure ratio. So we have to calculate based on the pressure ratio. So if you keep the back pressure same, but if you keep on increasing the stagnation pressure or the reservoir pressure on the left hand side, similar thing will happen. If you keep on increasing the reservoir pressure to very high level also, the flow rate cannot be increased after a certain point. Once the flow becomes choked, it does not matter whether you have 1000 atmospheric pressure, 10,000 atmospheric pressure or 1 lakh atmospheric pressure. It does not matter at all. The flow rate will become maximum and choked, and that's it. Means you cannot increase it further anymore. How much force you provide from the other end. Okay. So let us see what happens in a converging diverging nozzle. So for converging nozzle, I guess everybody should have understood. Any questions on the converging nozzle part? What happens? Let us try to understand then what happens in a convergent divergent nozzle, converging diverging nozzle, CD nozzle. So again we have drawn a schematic diagram of a converging diverging nozzle. It is connected to a reservoir on the left hand side. I hope you can hear me. Can somebody confirm?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So on the left hand side it is connected to a reservoir, and reservoir, as we have described, is a very large source of the gas, so that even if there is some flow of gas from the reservoir, the conditions in the reservoir does not change. Okay, conditions do not change. So the pressure remains equal to PR and temperature remains equal to TR. Okay. So if we consider that the velocity is very small at the inlet of the nozzle, then the stagnation pressure P0 and stagnation temperature T0 will be equal to the reservoir pressure PR and reservoir temperature TR. So T0 is equal to TR plus V square by 2 Cp. But if V is very small, then V square by 2 Cp is negligible. So T0 is equal to TR. And if T0 is equal to Tr, P0 also is equal to Pr. So stagnation pressures are known again, P0 and T0, like previous case. Now we have a convergent divergent nozzle, so there is a throat section, and then there is a converging section, there is a throat section with minimum area, and then there is a diverging section, and at the end of the diverging section we are providing a pressure PB, which is the back pressure, okay, and the exit pressure of the nozzle is PE, okay, actual exit pressure, like in the previous case we had seen for the convergent nozzle. Actual exit pressure PE was equal to back pressure PB. Okay, actual exit pressure PE was equal to back pressure PB up to the point where PB is equal to P star, means up to this point PE is equal to PB, means exit pressure is equal to back pressure. Whatever is the back pressure provided, the same is the exit pressure. But after this point, if we reduce the back pressure, exit pressure cannot change. Exit pressure will remain as P star. Okay. So after this point, whatever is the decrease in back pressure does not matter. P will remain equal to P star. So even if PB is less, PB is much less. Okay. So that is the difference between exit pressure. Exit pressure is the actual pressure that you can measure at the end of the nozzle. If you take a probe and measure, this is the pressure you will measure. Back pressure is the pressure that is we are providing outside the nozzle. Okay. So here also P is the exit pressure and PB is the back pressure. Okay. So again we will start with an example where the back pressure PB is equal to the reservoir pressure or stagnation pressure P0. Okay. So PB by P0 is equal to 1, which is case A here. Okay. So in this case what happens? Again there is everywhere the pressure remains equal to P0 because you are not providing any pressure gradient. So initially also the pressure is P0 and at the end also pressure is P0. So there is no pressure difference, so no pressure gradient, so there is no pressure. So pressure remains constant like this. Okay. And if the pressure remains constant, what is the flow rate? Flow rate is 0. So mass flow rate is 0. So what is the variation of Mach number within the nozzle? So initial Mach number is 0 because there is no flow rate, and then also Mach number remains 0 within the nozzle because there is no flow, and finally also it remains 0. So ultimately there is no flow. So everywhere the Mach number is 0. This is 0. Okay, 0 Mach number. So this is the Mach number versus the length, like the variation of Mach number along the length of the nozzle, and this is the variation of non-dimensional pressure P by P0 along the length of the nozzle. So now let us decrease the pressure slightly. So back pressure will decrease slightly. Okay. So instead of say 1 atmospheric pressure, we have made it 0.9 atmospheric pressure. P0 is still 1 atmospheric pressure, but this we have made 0.9 atmospheric pressure. Okay. So what happens? So within the converging section, now flow will be set up because there is a pressure difference. There will be a flow from this side of the domain to the other side of the domain. Okay, because of the pressure difference. Because on the left hand side you have higher pressure, on the right hand side you have lower pressure. So because flow is set up, what happens in the converging section? Flow will be accelerated, so velocity will increase. Okay, so the flow will be accelerated in the converging section like this. The Mach number will increase, and it will reach a maximum value at the smallest area, okay, which is the throat section. It will reach a maximum value. The maximum value is less than Mach number 1. So we do not reach sonic velocity. Okay, it is less than Mach number 1. So some value, say 0.5 or whatever Mach number we reach. So after this, in the diverging section, what will happen? Because the flow is subsonic, because the flow rate, flow velocity is less than sonic velocity, the diverging portion acts like a diffuser, means it will just decelerate the flow, slow down the flow again, okay, like a normal diffuser. So again in the diverging section, the velocity decreases and ultimately you get a low velocity at the end of the nozzle. Okay, so in the converging section, the velocity is increased, you reach maximum velocity at the throat, and in the diverging section, the velocity is again decreased. Okay, and you reach a low velocity at the end. Okay. What happens to the pressure? The pressure goes like this. Pressure decreases up to the throat section because the flow is accelerated. So pressure, if the velocity increases, pressure decreases basically. So once the velocity starts decreasing, the pressure again starts increasing, and ultimately you reach a higher pressure, which is equal to PV at the end. Automatically the pressure is set up like this, so that at the end you reach the back pressure PV. Okay, once you provide a PV pressure. Yeah. So this will keep on happening if you keep on decreasing the pressure, okay, until you reach a point when the flow is accelerated such that it reaches Mach number 1 at the throat section. Okay, so if you keep on decreasing the back pressure, you will reach a point at which the flow, so flow is getting accelerated if you keep on decreasing the pressure, back pressure. So one point will be reached at which the Mach number is equal to 1 at the throat section. Okay. So at this point the pressure curve looks like this. So pressure decreases, 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 and it reaches the critical pressure at this throat section. Critical pressure is P star, so it reaches P star at the throat section. Then in the divergence section, the pressure again increases. Pressure again increases and it reaches some pressure PC. This is the back pressure PC. Okay, this is the back pressure PC. So PV is equal to PC, for which the throat pressure is equal to the critical pressure. At this back pressure, PV is equal to PC, the pressure at the throat becomes equal to the critical pressure. Okay, PC is greater than critical pressure, but at this back pressure, the pressure at the throat, which is lower, becomes equal to the critical pressure, and you reach Mach number equal to 1 at the throat. Then the velocity will again decrease because we have just reached Mach number 1, but there is no driving force for the flow to accelerate because the pressure is decreasing. The velocity will again decrease, and the divergence section will act like a diffuser and like a subsonic diffuser, and the velocity will decrease to some subsonic value. Now we will come to what happens in this case F. Okay, we'll come to D and E later on. Let us consider this case F. Okay, F is a, so if you keep on now decreasing the back pressure, okay, from PC onwards, if I decrease the pressure further, say I decrease the pressure a lot, okay, I decrease the pressure a lot, and now the back pressure is equal to PF. Okay, now the back pressure is equal to PF. What is the pressure PF? It is the pressure for which the throat pressure is equal to critical pressure, such that in the diverging section also, the divergent part also acts like a nozzle. Okay, so what happens is that the pressure keeps on decreasing in the converging part. We reach a velocity of sonic velocity at the throat section, and then in the diverging part we have further acceleration, and pressure keeps on decreasing until we reach the low pressure PF. Okay, very low pressure PF. And what happens to the velocity? Velocity keeps on increasing like this. It reaches the sonic velocity, Mach number equal to 1 at the throat, and then it keeps on increasing further. It keeps on increasing further like a nozzle. Okay, like a nozzle, until you reach a very high velocity at this point F. Okay, so this acts like a convergent divergent nozzle. Okay, so once you have such a low back pressure PF, this device will act like a convergent divergent nozzle. If the back pressure is less than PC, means, sorry, it is higher than PC, means if it is in this region, this device will act like a convergent nozzle divergent diffuser. And if the pressure is in this region, it will act like a convergent divergent nozzle. Okay, I will come to what happens in between, but once you reach F, it acts like a convergent divergent nozzle. If you now decrease the back pressure even further, say you make it vacuum on the other side, okay, totally vacuum. So back pressure is 0 or very low back pressure. Okay, so in that case also nothing changes because the flow has become choked internally. So the velocity increases in the same fashion to the maximum, to the Mach number 1 at the throat, and then it keeps on increasing in the same fashion like the previous case F, and it reaches the velocity, same velocity which it would have reached in the case F. Okay, same velocity is reached, and the pressure also same pressure is reached, and then there is a sudden jump outside which acts like a shock wave, and the pressure is decreased further, okay, outside the nozzle. So inside the nozzle no change occurs. Now what happens in between if we have a pressure which is between PC and PM? Okay, say we have a pressure PD, okay, which is not sufficient for the entire nozzle to act like a convergent divergent nozzle, but also is the pressure is lower than what will be required for the device to act like a divergent diffuser. Okay, so it is a in between pressure, it is between PC and PF. So in this case what happens is that the nozzle tries to act like a convergent divergent nozzle. So the flow velocity up to the throat section, like the flow velocity up to the throat section, will remain similar. Okay, let me take some other color. So the flow velocity up to the throat section pattern will remain similar, and we will reach Mach number equal to 1 at the throat. Okay. Similarly, the pressure also will keep on decreasing, and you will reach critical pressure equal to critical pressure at the throat section. Okay. Then in the divergent section, the pressure will start decreasing even further. Okay, and the velocity will also start increasing even further, like a divergent nozzle. Okay, but because the final pressure is not equal to F but some higher pressure, so the nozzle it cannot act fully like a nozzle. So at some point there will be an internal shock wave, and suddenly there will be a jump, and the flow velocity, which was supersonic at this point, will become subsonic. Okay, it should be less than Mach number 1. So this point is lower than Mach number 1. Okay, so the flow velocity will become subsonic, and then it will act like a diffuser. Once the flow velocity becomes subsonic, for subsonic flow, this divergent section acts like a diffuser. So it will start acting like a diffuser, and the velocity will reduce. Okay, so in the divergent section, up to certain point, the divergent section will act like a nozzle. Then there will be a shock wave, sudden jump, and then it will act like a diffuser. You cannot say exactly what is the location at which the shock wave will form. It can be calculated, but this is beyond the scope of our course. But what we know is that there will be a shock wave somewhere in between in the divergent section, and the supersonic velocity will suddenly decrease to subsonic velocity, and then it will act like a diffuser. So the same thing will happen with the pressure. Pressure will keep on decreasing. Then after the shock wave, the pressure will increase, and then it will act like a diffuser. So pressure keeps on increasing until it reaches the pressure PD. Okay. Now, if you keep on decreasing the pressure further, you will reach a point E. Okay. So from C to E, the same thing will happen. Only thing that will change is that the location of the shock wave will change. So if I decrease the pressure even further, the shock wave will be further downstream, and then it will look like this. Okay, shock wave will be further downstream, and pressure will reduce at the back pressure will reduce. Okay, so that is the only change. If you have higher pressure here, so only thing is that the shock wave will be further upstream. Otherwise, no change will occur. Okay, so you will reach a point E, at which what will happen? There is no shock wave inside. Okay, so the flow will still act like a full convergent divergent nozzle like this. Okay, it will reach full like this. Then there will be a sudden jump outside, and the velocity will become subsonic. Okay, so the shock wave occurs outside, so it will become like this, and then there is a sudden jump, and the pressure increases outside. Okay, so this is what happens in a convergent divergent nozzle. Any question? So this you try to understand, you think about it. Okay, these two cases, later on when you study about this, you just think about what is happening in these two cases, because these are important. Okay. So in steam turbines, we use convergent divergent nozzles. The nozzles, I think I had showed you also. In the
Sir,
video, you will. Yes.
sir, I have a question. Sir, you said
Tell
that
me.
uh, when the shock wave occurs in the case from C to E,
Hmm.
when the shock wave occurs, the Mach number will go below 1.
Yes.
So in the case of E, I mean the critical case when the shock wave occurs, then is that point equal to Mach number 1, or it will be somewhere else?
No, no, no. It is not equal to Mach number 1. Okay. It looks like that. So from C to E, what will happen is that what you have said is correct. That like up to certain point, the flow is accelerated, flow becomes supersonic. Then suddenly there is a jump and the flow becomes subsonic. And once the flow becomes subsonic within the nozzle, say at this point the flow becomes subsonic. So downstream from the point, it should act like a diffuser, like because the area is increasing, it should act like a diffuser. So flow velocity keeps on decreasing. Okay. So for a certain point E, okay, for a certain point E, pressure E, if you have the pressure below E, between E and F, okay, so then the shock wave does not occur within the nozzle, it occurs outside the nozzle. So the flow keeps on accelerating in the nozzle. So at the throat the Mach number is equal to 1, not at E. Okay, at the throat the Mach number is equal to 1, and then the flow velocity is further increased. So at the end the Mach number is much greater than 1. Okay, at the end the Mach number is much greater than 1, similar to the case of F or G. Okay, it depends on what is the area, cross sectional area at the end of the nozzle. So the Mach number will be much greater than 1. Then outside the nozzle there is the jump. Okay, outside the nozzle there is the jump, and then the flow velocity becomes subsonic outside the nozzle. Okay, after the shock wave. But in the nozzle, the flow velocity is much greater than the Mach number 1. The Mach number 1 occurs at the throat always. Okay. Now, if the Mach number is 1 at the throat, you have to see what happens downstream, whether it is acting like a diffuser or a nozzle. If it acts like a diffuser, velocity will decrease. If it acts like a nozzle, velocity will increase in the divergence section. So for E, or from any point between E and F, it acts like a nozzle. So the velocity will increase, and the velocity will be higher than Mach number 1 at the end. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these nozzles that are used in steam turbines, okay, are like convergent divergent nozzles. They do not look like conventional nozzles. What we'll draw here, okay. They look somewhat different. I think I had shown you in the video. I am not going to spend too much time on the video, but if I have a slide, I will show it just once so that you get some idea. Okay, so the nozzles are like this. They are also aerofoil shaped, and the turbine blades are also like shaped like this. Okay. So what happens is that the cross sectional area between these two blades actually decreases and again increases. Okay, the cross sectional area, it is not clear from the diagram, but they are designed in such a way so that the cross sectional area decreases and again increases. So they act like a convergent divergent nozzle. Okay, this gaps between these blades are known as fixed blades. Okay, because they are mounted on the casing. Okay, they are not rotating. So once the flow is accelerated through the nozzle, so if the flow comes in with a subsonic velocity, then it becomes sonic, and then it is accelerated to supersonic velocity. Then they impinge on the rotating blades, okay, like this, impinge on the rotating blades, and then the kinetic energy. After the nozzle, the flow has very large kinetic energy. That kinetic energy is transferred as work, so that whatever is the energy in the fluid, most of it is used for pushing the blades forward. Okay, the blades are pushed forward, and the flow comes out at a lower velocity from the other side, and the energy that is transferred to the blades causes the blades to rotate. Okay, so this is how the nozzles look like. These are the nozzles. Okay, in real life, this, not these ones. Okay, this here you can see. very slanted objects that you can see. These are the nozzles. So actually the gap in between them act like a converging diverging nozzle. It's not clear from the diagram. These are very carefully manufactured. Okay, so that the passage area changes exactly like a convergent divergent nozzles. Okay. So we will have a quick discussion on steam nozzles, in particular how steam nozzles behave, and then we will see couple of problems today. Okay. Whatever we have discussed is still valid for steam nozzles, but for steam nozzles, there are certain more things we need to take into account. So whatever we have discussed is more valid for ideal, like nozzles with ideal gases. Now, if we consider steam to be an ideal gas, then we can use whatever we have discussed. Okay, so that is what we are going to see. So if we want to consider steam as an ideal gas, what are the values we need to take, things like that quickly. Okay. So flow through steam nozzle is difficult to calculate, obviously, and can be roughly approximated using ideal gas laws. Okay, that's why we have read all these things, right? Otherwise, why will we read so many derivations and so many things? Because we want to use those laws or whatever we have discussed till now. Variation of temperature with Mach number, variation of pressure with Mach number, variation of area with Mach number, then critical pressure, critical temperature, velocity, speed of sound. Okay, all these things we have read because we want to apply them from steam nozzles. Otherwise, we don't have any point in reading those things. So we will be using ideal gas laws to approximate steam when we are calculating about steam nozzles. Okay. So if you consider the expansion of steam, okay, in a HS diagram, TS diagram you already know, HS diagram is similar to a TS diagram. So in a HS diagram, the two-phase region looks like this dome, like in the TS diagram, similar to that. The HS diagram also, the two-phase region looks like a dome, like shown by this red line. And the constant pressure lines are slanted. Okay, instead of being horizontal like in TS diagram, the constant pressure lines are slanted. So this blue line is a constant pressure line P1, and this other blue line is another constant pressure line P2, where P1 is greater than P2. Okay. So if we consider the expansion of steam, I will again use this one. It's much more easy to discuss by drawing. So if we consider the expansion of steam from pressure P1 to pressure P2 and some say enthalpy or like some other, the state is fixed with some other variable, enthalpy is known or temperature is known. Okay, so the state is fixed, that's 1, and the pressure is P1, and the steam expands to lower pressure P2. Okay, so if it's an isentropic nozzle, entropy remains constant and we can draw a vertical line to denote the process. Okay, so the enthalpy decreases from H1 to H2 and temperature decreases from T1 to T2. In a TS diagram also you can draw this same thing. Only thing is that the constant pressure lines will look horizontal. Okay. So steam expands from 1 to 2 in the nozzle. Okay. So what happens in real life is that when steam expands, okay, at this point, at the saturation curve, okay, this is the saturation curve, right? What is the meaning of the saturation curve? Outside the saturation curve, we have superheated steam. So in this region, we should have superheated steam. And within the saturation curve, we should have two-phase steam. Means there should be some liquid and some vapor. Okay. So once the steam starts expanding, it is superheated, and it reaches the saturated curve. And at this point, some condensation should start to happen, right? Because now we are entering the two-phase region. So some condensation should start to happen, and then we should have some liquid formation, liquid droplet formation, and ultimately we should have a two-phase mixture, some liquid and some vapor within the nozzle. But in real life, what is seen is that this condensation is not, the condensation does not start at the saturation curve. Okay, because the steam has such a high velocity in the nozzle, so there is a certain inertia, okay, for this conversion of vapor to liquid. So Even after entering the two-phase region also, this steam still remains in a superheated state. Okay, it still remains in a superheated state, and ultimately much further down, means at a much lower quality, as means quality means in terms of the diagram, at a much lower quality as compared to the saturation curve, actually the condensation starts. Okay, this line where the actual condensation start, okay, corresponds approximately, so it is seen from experiments that it corresponds approximately to a quality of 96%, x equal to 0.96, and is known as Wilson line. Okay, so if somebody asks you what is Wilson line, say there is a question in GATE that what is Wilson line with respect to expansion of steam in a nozzle. Okay, so Wilson line is the line which denotes the point at which steam will start condensing when it is flowing at high velocity through a nozzle. Okay, it is the line at which the steam will start condensing when it is flowing at high velocity through a nozzle. So steam does not start condensing at x equal to 1. Ideally, it should have started condensing at x equal to 1 if the velocity was very small. But because of very high velocity and very high inertia, it takes a certain amount of time for the steam to start condensing, and instead of x equal to 1, the steam starts condensing at x equal to 0.96. Okay, this is known as Wilson line. So this corresponds to the actual condensation, starting of the actual condensation. Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, sir.
My headset battery is down. I will take a 5 minutes break. Okay, and then we will continue this discussion after 5 minutes. Let me recharge my headset battery. So we will continue. Okay. I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if the headset battery goes down, we will use the
Yes.
laptop microphone. So anyway, we are discussing about steam nozzles, and I was explaining what is Wilson line. Okay. The significance of this line is that the actual condensation starts at this point, and this delay happens because of high velocity of steam in the nozzle. Okay. So anyway, coming back to nozzles, when we do the calculations, if we have to assume steam to be an ideal gas, there are certain empirical values that we can take for the calculation. So if the inlet of the steam is superheated, like this case, okay, it is outside the two-phase region, outside the dome. So if the inlet is superheated, then for steam gamma is taken is equal to 1.3. Okay, the value of gamma is taken equal to 1.3 for super. It's just an empirical value. Okay, it's like a best approximation, you can say. Although the gamma value will actually change, but this is like if you want to take a constant gamma, this is the value we should take, gamma equal to 1.3. And with this value we can do all the calculations. What is the critical temperature ratio, critical pressure ratio? So for example, with this value, the critical pressure ratio P star by P0, we have already derived this formula. You can also derive it very easily. Is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1 whole to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. So the critical pressure ratio is 0.546. It means that on one side, if I have 1 atmospheric pressure, on the other side, if I have 0.546 atmospheric pressure, I will reach sonic velocity at the end of the nozzle. If my pressure is lower than 0.546 atmospheric pressure on the right hand side, and left hand side pressure is 1 atmospheric pressure, but right hand side pressure is lower than 0.546 atmospheric pressure, then the nozzle will be choked. Okay, and the flow pattern will not change. So you can see that around it's around slightly more than 50%. So if I have a 50% decrease in pressure only, then itself the nozzle will get choked. Okay, it's not a very big difference. So it's very easy to attain in real life. Okay, so if you have say twice the pressure on one side of the nozzle and other side is basically means on one side you have double pressure, other side you have normal pressure, you will have a choked nozzle. So this is for superheated inlet. If the inlet is within the dome, within the two-phase region, so nozzle can also start within the two-phase region. Okay, like for example, going from here to here. Okay, going from this point to this point. Okay, so if the start of the nozzle itself, means the expansion in the nozzle itself is within the two-phase region, empirically gamma is taken to be equal to 1.14. Although it is not very accurate to use ideal gas laws in the two-phase region, obviously, but there is no other option. So for the simplistic calculations, ideal gas laws are used, and in that case you have to take gamma equal to 1.14. In that case, P star by P0 critical pressure ratio is 0.576. Not much difference, but slightly different. Okay, and you can do all the calculations assuming these values of gamma. So you can calculate whatever we have discussed till now, like so T star by T0 will be 2 by gamma plus 1, and then sonic velocity will be root over gamma RT. So in that case also root over gamma RT, you have to take this gamma value, what has been shown here. So if you want to find the speed of sound, root over gamma RT, you have to take this gamma. What will be R? So you have to take, how will you know what is the value of R for steam? Universal gas constant is fixed, right? 8.317 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. So what is the relation between that and the normal gas constant? It's 1314, I think, right? Like for air, the gas constant is 0.287 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. So how does this 0.287 is calculated for air?
Sir, R by molecular weight of air.
R by molecular weight. So similarly for steam also R by molecular weight of steam. Okay. Molecular weight of steam is much less than molecular weight of air. Molecular weight of air is around 29. Molecular weight of steam is 18. So R by 18 will be much greater than 0.287. So typically this value is, I think we have in a problem. Not this problem. We have a problem with steam also, where I don't remember. I think is it not here? What is the value of R? So this is the value for steam. Okay, 0.4615 kilojoule per kg Kelvin, or 0.4615 into 10 to the power 3 joule per kg Kelvin. Okay. For air it is 287 joule per kg Kelvin. For steam it is 461.5 joule per kg Kelvin. Okay. So it can be easily calculated from the universal gas constant R bar by molecular weight. Okay. Anyway, let us come back. Okay. So like this we can calculate the speed of sound root over gamma RT. Okay, for any temperature. Now all these things again we will just reiterate like if you want to calculate the nozzle exit velocity just from the enthalpy difference, okay, just the exit velocity, not what is the variation within the nozzle. If you want to find the variation within the nozzle, what we have discussed previously, like the variation with respect to area versus Mach number, those have to be calculated. But just from end to end, if you use first law, you can find out the variation of velocity. So at the inlet, if the velocity is v1 and enthalpy is h1, and at the exit the velocity is v2 and enthalpy is h2. So using first law, h1 plus v1 square by 2 is equal to h2 plus v2 square by 2. If v1 is almost negligible, means very low velocity is there at the inlet, so you can ignore this term. So v2 will be approximately equal to root over 2 h1 minus h2. Okay, so we can calculate v2. If v1 is known also, we can calculate v2, just the expression will be different. Okay. And if we have a certain nozzle efficiency, if the nozzle is not 100% efficient, means if there are isentropic losses, frictional losses, then instead of the process going from 1 to 2s like a vertical line, okay, what will happen? The process will deviate towards the right hand side. Okay, like we know what happens in case of non-isentropic flow. The process deviates towards the right hand side, entropy increases. Okay, so instead of going to 0.2s, we will go to some point which is 0.2. Okay, so the enthalpy, actual enthalpy will be H2. Okay, ideal enthalpy should have been H2s, but actual enthalpy will be H2. So the nozzle efficiency is defined as the change in actual enthalpy H1 minus H2 divided by the change in ideal enthalpy H1 minus H2s. Okay. So ideally the enthalpy difference would have been larger, but because of frictional losses, the enthalpy difference that we are getting is smaller. So what happens? The velocity change also is smaller, okay, in real life. So the actual velocity change is v2 square by 2 minus v1 square by 2 using first law from this equation h1 minus h2. And the ideal change in velocity is v2s square by 2 minus v1 square by 2. Okay, if v1 is negligible, so the efficiency can be written as v2 square by 2 by v2s square by 2, 2 gets cancelled, so v2 square by v2s square. Okay, so v2 will be, if the efficiency is say 95%, v2 will be lower than v2s. So ideally we would have obtained a higher velocity in the nozzle, but in real life we are obtaining a lower velocity because of frictional losses, and the change in enthalpy in the nozzle is less. Okay. Any questions? We will take a look at a couple of problems now. So we have covered a lot of materials regarding nozzles, and it is needed because we need to know how the variation of the properties in the nozzle occurs, how to design a nozzle. Let us take a look at a couple of problems to consolidate this material. If there are no questions, so remember that if you want to use ideal gas laws for steam nozzles, if it is specified that it's a steam nozzle, you need to take gamma equal to 1.3 for all calculations. If the inlet, not the exit, if only the inlet itself is outside the two-phase region, then whatever happens is fine. Inlet outside means you have to take gamma equal to 1.3. Inlet is within the two-phase region, you take gamma equal to 1.14. These are from empirical relations. Okay. So let us consider a converging diverging nozzle as shown in the figure below. Okay. You can see the screen still, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we'll take two examples today. First, let us consider a converging diverging nozzle as shown below. Inlet conditions are given to us. Inlet temperature is 800 Kelvin, Ti. Pi is 1 MPa, means inlet pressure. Inlet velocity is negligible, okay, almost equal to 0. We will take 0 for our calculation. Then the throat area is given as 20 centimeter square, okay, and outlet Mach number is given as 2. Outlet Mach number is 2. Okay, and it is given that for this gas the gamma value is 1.4. So basically this is air. Gamma is 1.4 and R is 0.287 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. Okay, if it was steam, same problem can be done with steam also. Gamma will be 1.3 or 1.14 and R will be 0.4615. Okay, but in this case these values are given. Gamma is 1.4 and R is 0.287 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. We need to find the throat conditions. The conditions at this point. Okay, what are the conditions? What do we need to find? The temperature, pressure and density at this point. So what is the pressure, temperature and density at the throat section? Then we need to find what is the mass flow rate. Okay, we do not know what is the mass flow rate. Okay, so we have to find what is the mass flow rate through this nozzle. We only know the inlet condition and throat area. So based on this, we have to find the mass flow rate. And we have to find the exit plane condition and exit area also. So what is the area at the exit? Okay, and what are the conditions, temperature, pressure at that point? Okay, at the exit. There is one question I would like to ask here before we dive into the problem. If we know that, so what will be the Mach number at the throat section?
So 1.
It will be 1, right? So if the Mach number is 1 at the throat section, okay, and Mach number is 2 at the exit, okay. So does it mean that the area will be 2 times the area, like area at the exit? Like, can we directly say what will be the area at the exit just based on the Mach number, change in Mach number, what is happening? Or we cannot say anything about the area without doing further calculation?
Sir, the density will also change, no?
Density will also drastically change. We cannot say anything about this. Okay. Another thing is that is the velocity at the exit 2 times the velocity at the throat section or not?
Yes, sir.
It is 2 times the velocity at the throat because the Mach number is twice. Is it so? Or what will be the speed of sound at the throat section if the temperature is T star? Throat section temperature is T star, right? So what will be the
Yes.
speed of sound? Root over gamma T star. Root over gamma T star, right? What will be the sonic velocity at the exit section? Will it be root over gamma T star?
No, sir.
It will be whatever is the temperature there. Means based on that we have to calculate root over gamma T. Okay. So local sonic velocity actually changes along the length because the temperature changes. Sonic velocity is always proportional, means proportional to the square root of local temperature, right? So at the exit, because the temperature will be different, the sonic velocity is also different. So Mach number 2 does not mean that the velocity is actually twice the throat velocity, okay, because the sonic velocity is different. The Mach number equal to 1 here would have been different as compared to Mach number 1 at the throat, okay, because the sonic velocity is different. So that we have to be careful about. Sonic velocity does not, the speed of sound does not remain constant throughout the nozzle. It is a function of the temperature. Okay. How does the temperature vary across the nozzle? Will it increase or decrease along the length of the nozzle? What do you feel? All these are like conceptual questions, can be asked in the exam. What do you feel? The temperature will decrease or increase? You can answer this based on fundamentals. Like first law you can use and you can answer very easily. You don't have to answer arbitrarily.
Like it will decrease along the
Decreases.
It will decrease, correct, good. How can we say that it will decrease? Because velocity is increasing.
Kinetic energies.
Yes, correct. Kinetic energy is generated, velocity is increasing, and it will come. Where from the kinetic energy can come? It can only come from the enthalpy. So at the expense of the enthalpy. So enthalpy will decrease, the temperature will decrease. Okay. So initially kinetic energy is 0. So Ti is equal to T0, stagnation temperature. So T0 remains constant. Remember, kinetic, the stagnation temperature and stagnation enthalpy remains constant. So T0 remains constant, and T0 is equal to T plus V square by 2 Cp. Okay. These relations you should not forget. Okay. So sorry, poorly I have done this slide. So again, it has gone from T0 is equal to T plus V square by 2 Cp. Okay. So T0 remains constant. So if V increases, T has to decrease. Static temperature will decrease if velocity increases. Okay. So once you know that T0 is equal to T plus V square by 2 Cp, we can also write in terms of Mach number. T0 by T is equal to 1 plus gamma minus 1 by 2 m square. So if m increases, T will decrease. T0 remains constant. Similarly, what will happen to pressure if the temperature decreases? From this relation, we can say what will happen to the pressure also. So pressure will also decrease. Okay, and that we have seen. Pressure will decrease and then again increase. Okay, or pressure will keep on decreasing. What will happen? So if it is fully convergent divergent nozzle, pressure will keep on decreasing like this. Okay, it will follow a path like this. So pressure will also decrease. Okay, along the length. Temperature will decrease, pressure will decrease. Okay. So let us jump into the problem. Okay. Let us keep the problem open on this side. And jump into the solution. So inlet conditions are given to us. Okay. Let us take a few assumptions that this is an ideal gas and we are solving 1D isentropic flow, and inlet velocity is actually equal to 0. Okay, it is given that it's almost equal to 0, we'll take it to actually equal to 0. So for all these type of problems, the solution process, one of the important things that you should remember, this is just a tip for you, you don't have to write like this. Remember that stagnation pressure and temperature are constant throughout the nozzle because it's a 1D isentropic flow. The stagnation pressure and temperature is constant throughout the nozzle. Okay. So the stagnation pressure and temperature at this point is equal to the stagnation pressure and temperature at this point, at this point, at this point, or at this point, or at the throat, or at the exit. Okay. Stagnation pressure, temperature, and pressure does not change from the inlet to the throat to the exit. This is a very important point because this will help us to relate all the different locations. So without this, you cannot solve the problem. Okay. So this is the important point that we need to remember. Stagnation pressure and temperature P0 and T0 are constant throughout the nozzle. Now for calculating for the throat section, okay, at the throat the Mach number is equal to 1. So what is the stagnation pressure and temperature for this case? Because Vi is equal to 0, T0 is equal to Ti plus Vi square by 2 Cp. So T0 is equal to Ti. So stagnation temperature is 800 Kelvin and stagnation pressure P0 is equal to Pi is 1 MPa. Okay. So stagnation temperature and pressure are equal to 800 Kelvin and 1 MPa. Okay. So as Vi is equal to 0, T0 is equal to Ti plus Vi square by 2 Cp is equal to Ti. So T0 is equal to 800 Kelvin. Okay. And stagnation pressure, because stagnation temperature is equal to Ti, stagnation pressure also is equal to Pi, which is 1 MPa. Okay. Say some Vi is given, not this problem, say another problem I have given to you, and Vi is given as 100 meter per second. The same problem I have given in a different way with Vi equal to 100 meter per second. Then how will you calculate P0? How will you calculate first T0? T0 is written directly, right? On the screen itself it's written.
Yes.
Ti plus 100 square by 2 Cp. Okay, you will get T0. Now how will you calculate P0?
So from the relation between P and T.
Means which relation? Can you tell me the relation?
P by P0 equal to P by T0 to the power gamma by gamma.
Correct. So P0 by Pi is equal to T0 by Ti to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. Okay. And because Pi is given as 1 MPa and T0 will be calculated from here and Ti is also known. So T0 by Ti will be known. So T0 by Ti to the power gamma by gamma minus 1 can be calculated, and that will be equal to P0 by Pi. So from that P0 can be calculated. Using the same relation only we have calculated that P0 is equal to Pi, because T0 is equal to Ti, T0 by Ti to the power gamma by gamma minus 1 equal to 1. Okay, because T0 by Ti is equal to 1. That's why P0 by Pi is equal to 1. That's why I have written P0 is equal to Pi equal to 1 MPa. Okay. So any other velocity also you should be able to tackle at the inlet. Okay. So anyway, now at the throat section, we know that Mach number should be equal to 1. As the inlet is subsonic, velocity is almost 0, so inlet is subsonic, and exit is supersonic. So it means that it acts like a convergent divergent nozzle. So the only place where Mach number can be equal to 1 is the throat section. So at the throat section, Mach number is equal to 1. Okay. And if the Mach number is equal to 1 at the throat section, all the properties should be equal to the critical properties at the throat section. Okay. So by using our relations of critical properties, T star by T0 is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1. If you don't remember, it can be easily derived also. Okay. From first principles. One case I will show, other cases you have to. So this was the relation. T star by T0 is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1. How did we derive it? Based on first principle, T0 is equal to T plus V square by 2 Cp, or T0 by T is equal to 1 plus V square by 2 Cpt. Okay. Replacing Cp by gamma R by gamma minus 1. Okay, we can write T0 by T is equal to 1 plus V square by 2T gamma R by gamma minus 1. Yes, something. And then we can rearrange the term to get T0 by T is equal to 1 plus gamma minus 1 by 2. Okay, by taking out this gamma minus 1 and 2, gamma minus 1 by 2, V square by gamma RT. Gamma RT is C square, so V square by C square is M square. So T0 by T is equal to 1 plus gamma minus 1 by 2 M square. Very easily it can be derived. Once you know the relation between T0 and T, you can find the relation between P0 and P using the isentropic relation, and rho 0 and rho also using the isentropic relation. Okay. So if you put M equal to 1, you will get the star properties, means you will get the critical properties. If we put M equal to 1, we get 1 plus gamma minus 1 by 2, which is equal to gamma plus 1 by 2. So T0 by T star is equal to gamma plus 1 by 2. Or if you reverse this, T star by T0 is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1. Okay. Similarly, P star by P0 is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1. Means P star by P0 is equal to T star by T0 whole to the power gamma by gamma minus 1 using isentropic relation for an ideal gas. So P star by P0 is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1 whole to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. And similarly, you can also find rho star by rho 0 is equal to T star by T0 to the power 1 by gamma minus 1. Okay. So same relations we will use. So T star by T0 is equal to 2 by gamma plus 1. Gamma is given as 1.4. So 2 by 2.4, which is 0.8333. So because T0 is 800 Kelvin, we get T star to be 666.67 Kelvin. Okay. This is the temperature at the throat section. You can see that the temperature is less than the inlet temperature. Okay, because temperature will keep on decreasing as the velocity increases. Temperature, and based on this temperature, we can calculate what will be the speed of sound at the throat section. So you can easily see that the speed of sound at the throat section is lower because gamma RT is lower, root over gamma RT is lower as compared to the inlet section where T is higher. T is 800 Kelvin at the inlet. So speed of sound is higher at the inlet, speed of sound is lower at the throat section. Okay. So we are digressing. We don't need to mention these things in the problem. I'm just trying to give you some more insight. Now P star by P0 is equal to T star by T0 whole to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. So T star by T0 is 0.8333 whole to the power 1.4 by 0.4. So you will get P star by P0 to be 0.5283. Okay. This is the critical pressure ratio as I was saying, 0.5283. Okay. For air it is 0.5283. So P star is equal to, because the inlet pressure, stagnation pressure is 1 MPa, then P star is equal to 0.5283 MPa. Okay, so the pressure at the throat is 0.5283 MPa. And density also you can calculate using ideal gas, means using the isentropic relation, or directly we can calculate based on ideal gas expression. Rho star is equal to, rho is equal to P by RT. So at the throat, rho is equal to rho star. So at the throat, rho star is equal to P star by RT star. Okay. R is R is 287. Okay. P star we have calculated 528.3 kilopascal and T star is 666.67. Okay. So if you replace these values, you will get the density at the throat to be equal to 2.761 kg per meter cube. Okay. So these are our throat properties. What is the problem? This is the problem, right? So throat conditions. So we have obtained the throat condition. Temperature 666.67, pressure 528.3 kilopascal, and density 2.761 kg per meter cube. Then next point is to calculate the mass flow rate. Okay. So mass flow rate we can calculate from the throat section because the area of the throat is given. So remember what is mass flow rate? Mass flow rate is rho star A star C star, rho AC or rho AV. Basically mass flow rate is m dot is equal to rho AV, density into area into velocity. Now at the throat section, the velocity is equal to speed of sound C star. Okay, at the throat section velocity is equal to speed of sound C star. Area A star is given as 20 centimeter square and density rho star we have just now calculated 2.761. Okay. So the speed of sound we can calculate. So C star is equal to root over gamma T star. So gamma is 1.4, R is 287, T star is equal to 666.67. If you plug in the values, you will get that the sonic velocity at the throat section is 517.56 meter per second. Okay. So m dot is equal to 2.761 into 20 into 10 to the power minus 4 meter square. From centimeter square I am converting to meter square SI units. 20 into 10 to the power minus 4 meter square into 517.56 meter per second. Okay. So it will give us the mass flow rate in kg per second and we can obtain the mass flow rate to be 2.858 kg per second. Okay. Any questions up to this point? Problem is not difficult to solve at all. Okay. Although we have gone through large equations, you will see that the problems are quite intuitive and very easy to solve. Any questions up to this point in this problem?
No, sir.
Okay.
No,
So
sir.
throat condition is obtained, mass flow rate is obtained. Now we have to obtain the exit plane condition and the exit area. One information is given to us is that exit Mach number is 2. Okay, so we have to use this information to find the exit plane condition. What will be our strategy? Can anyone say how can we find the, say, the temperature at the exit? What strategy we will use to find the temperature at the exit? and the pressure at the exit. Up to this point, if you have understood, you should know how to calculate very easily the temperature, pressure and density at the exit. Can you tell me?
Sir, T0
Ye-
is constant in terms of gamma.
T0 is constant, right?
Yes, sir.
So we have this equation T0 by T is equal to 1 plus gamma minus 1 by 2 m square. This is valid anywhere in the nozzle. So now if T0 is constant and Mach number is 2, exit Mach number is 2, right? I can just replace 2 here and I will get temperature T. Is it clear to everyone? Okay. So now how will you get the pressure? Exit pressure?
So T0 by T is equal to P0 by P to the power gamma upon gamma minus.
P0 by P is equal to, you have said the opposite way, P0 by P is equal to T0 by T to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. Okay, correct. So from that relation, once you know what is T0 by T, we can find out what is P0 by P. P0 is known, so we can find out P. And then density we can find using P by RT. Okay, or you can use isentropic relation like this, or you can directly find using P by RT. So that is the strategy that we are going to use. Okay. T0 by TE at the exit, to denote exit I am using T is equal to 1 plus gamma minus 1 by 2 ME square. Same expression. Okay. So I will go back to the problem now. Just wanted to show you that expression. Problem solving is not difficult. So T0 by T is equal to 1 plus 1.4 minus 1 by 2 into 2 square. So T0 by T is 1.8. Because T0 is 800 Kelvin, we can obtain TE to be 444.44 Kelvin. So what is the speed of sound at the exit? It is even lower than the speed of sound at the throat. So speed of sound actually decreases along the length of the nozzle. Okay. And at the exit, the speed of sound will be lower. So Mach number equal to 2 does not mean that the velocity is twice the velocity at the throat. It is actually less than twice the velocity at the throat. Because the speed of sound is reduced, Mach number 2 is actually less than twice the velocity of speed of sound at the throat. Okay. Anyway, let us come back to the problem. So this is T, then you can find P using the isentropic relation as you have already explained. P0 by P is equal to T0 by T to the power gamma by gamma minus 1. Gamma is 1.4. So using this relation, we can find P to be 127.8 kilopascal. And rho is equal to P by RT. So P we have already calculated, T we have already calculated, R is 1.4, sorry, R is 0.287. So we can find rho E to be 1.002 kg per meter cube. Okay, density also has decreased drastically. So density also decreases along the length of the nozzle. So final thing that is left for us to calculate is the exit area. And again we can use the equation for mass flow rate, m dot is equal to rho AV. So for the exit section, m dot is equal to rho E, rho at the exit, area at the exit into velocity at the exit. So if we know the rho at the exit, which we already know 1.002 kg per meter cube, and if we know what is the velocity at the exit, we can find out the area at the exit, because mass flow rate already we have calculated to be 2.858 kg per second. Okay, so 2.858 is equal to 1.002, which is the rho E, into A into velocity is Mach number 2 into speed of sound. Speed of sound is root over gamma RT, 1.4 into 287 into 444.44, because that is the temperature that we have obtained. Okay, so 2 into root over 1.4 into 287 into 444.44 is the speed of sound. So from this you get the area to be 3.3753 into 10 to the power minus 3 meters square. One thing you should be careful about is you should go to lot of decimal places when you do calculations like this. Okay, don't just go to 1 or 2 decimal places, then your result will be very inaccurate. Okay, because we are dealing with very small numbers here, fractions. You have to go to at least 4 decimal places. So 3.3753 into 10 to the power minus 3 meters square, which is equal to 33.753 centimeters square. Okay. If I had truncated this at 1 decimal place, I would have 3.4 into 10 to the power minus 3. So I would have obtained 34 centimeters square, which is quite inaccurate. Exact value is 33.753 centimeters square. we should go to more decimal places. So we can see that the area has increased as it should. Okay. So throat section area was 20 centimeters square, exit area is 33.753 centimeters square. At any other location, so this actually concludes the problem. At any other location also, you will be able to find the area and all the properties if the Mach number is given. If I say that the Mach number at this point is 0.7, you should be able to calculate what is the temperature, pressure, density and area at that section. If I say that the Mach number at this section is 1.4, again you should be able to calculate pressure, temperature, density and area at that cross section. So by changing the Mach number in small steps, so if I write a program, I can change the Mach number in terms of 0.01, okay, in small steps, and I will be able to find the area. So Mach number equal to 1, what is the area? Mach number equal to 1.01, what is the area? Mach number equal to 1.02, what is the area? Like this, for small steps, I will be able to find the area by writing a program, and then I can design the actual nozzle, that how the nozzle shape changes with along with increasing Mach number, okay, starting from the inlet to the exit. Only thing you need to know is what will be the length of the nozzle, means what will be the gradient, that you will find the change in cross-sectional area, but how fast this change will occur, that you have to base on some gradient like 7° or 8° gradient. Anyway, we will not digress too much. But my point here is that you will be able to calculate the exit area and any, not the exit area and cross-sectional area and any information, temperature, pressure, density, at any location if I give you the Mach number for this problem. Any questions? The same page again is repeated. I think I have scanned twice the same thing. Any questions?
Yes.
Okay. So let us go to, so you should be able to solve this type of problems. Okay. So let us go to a second problem. Consider a steam nozzle as shown below. Okay, so we have a steam nozzle now, and steam comes at an inlet condition of 1 MPa, 500 degrees centigrade. Realistic values from a steam turbine. Okay, so realistic values will be like this only, like 1 MPa or 2 MPa, something like that, and 500 degrees centigrade. Inlet velocity is almost equal to 0. Mass flow rate is given to us 2.5 kg per second. The mass flow rate is given to us 2.5 kg per second. And pressure at the exit is 200 kPa. So pressure at the inlet is also known, 1 MPa. Pressure at the exit is also known, 200 kPa. Okay. We need to find the exit area of the nozzle and the exit Mach number. Okay, we need to find the exit area of the nozzle. What is the area? So we don't have any information regarding any area anywhere, but we do have the mass flow rate. Okay, so from the mass flow rate we have to calculate the area, and we also have to calculate the exit Mach number. What is the Mach number at the exit? Okay, so this is the question. So now there are multiple approaches for this problem. So if you use ideal gas laws, this problem can be solved much easily. And if it is given in exam for you, you should use ideal gas laws, okay, to solve this problem, and you will be able to solve it like the previous problem very easily. Okay, just assume that this will be superheated condition, 1 MPa, 500 degrees centigrade. So assume that gamma is equal to 1.3 and just solve the problem like the previous problem, and you will be able to calculate all the other things very easily, like using the relations. So stagnation temperature and pressure is already known, equal to P1 and T1. So from the stagnation properties and from the exit pressure, you will be able to get the exit Mach number, and then the area also it can be easily calculated based on the mass flow rate once you calculate the density and temperature. Okay, temperature and density. So it's a very easy problem if you want to use ideal gas laws. However, just to illustrate that we can also solve this problem in a different way, I will show you another method. Okay, you need not use it in the exam. It is more complicated, but it is a more generalized method in the sense that it does not use the Hello, can you hear me? My headphone again has battery has gone down. I will be using the mic in my laptop. Let me just rearrange my desk a little bit. Can somebody confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Let us continue in that case. So I will show you another way of solving it, but you should use the ideal gas method only, because that is much easier for if there is any problem like this given in the exam. Okay. But what I will show you is a more general method where actually we do not need to use the ideal gas laws. So it is valid even without using ideal gas laws or with the ideal gas assumption. Okay. Although it also needs lot of assumptions, but still it is more generic. So let us first draw this process. Okay. So I will keep the problem open on this side. Inlet condition, pressure is 1 MPa. And temperature is 500 degrees centigrade. If you draw the constant pressure line looks like this, something like this. Okay. And it will be in the superheated region. You can easily verify. 500 degrees centigrade cannot be in the two-phase region because it's much beyond the critical point. And point 2, we do not know whether it is in the two-phase region or not. I have just drawn it as if it is in the superheated region, but we are not sure. I am not sure. So it is just vertically below 0.1. Okay, assuming that it's an isentropic nozzle. So as V1 is equal to 0, inlet stagnation properties are equal to the inlet static properties. Okay, like we have discussed. So T01 is equal to T1 equal to 500 degrees centigrade, and P01 is equal to P1 is equal to 1 MPa. Okay, so from superheated tables, I am not going to the tables to save time. You can go to the superheated table. By now you should be very familiar. You can look up the entry 1 MPa pressure, 500 degrees centigrade in the superheated tables. You will find the enthalpy to be 3479.1 kilojoule per kg for 500 degrees centigrade and 1 MPa pressure. From the superheated table, the enthalpy is 3479.1 kilojoule per kg. Okay. So the enthalpy H1 is 3479.1 kilojoule per kg, and that is also equal to the stagnation enthalpy H01 as the velocity is 0. And also you can find S1, this is not rho 1, this is S1 entropy from the table corresponding to 1 MPa pressure and 500 degrees centigrade. The entropy is 7.7642 kilojoule per kg. Why do we need to calculate the find the enthalpy entropy from the table?
Sir, find
Sir.
temperature 0.2.
We want to find the 0.2 state of 0.2. Okay, correct. So whether it's the temperature or the quality, whatever, we want to find the state of 0.2. So one condition is given for 0.2, which is pressure, but we don't have any other conditions. So from the we know that the entropy will remain same. So H2 will be equal to S1. Okay. So we will use that relation. H2 is equal to S1 is equal to 7.7642 kilojoule per kg Kelvin as the process is isentropic, and pressure is given to us as 0.2 MPa. Okay. So based on these two values, we can check. Again, I am not going into the details to save time, but you can easily do it because you have already done similar problems. you can check that H2 is greater than Sg at 200 kPa. What is Sg? Sg is the saturated vapor entropy at 200 kPa. So if we verify, we will find that H2 is greater than the saturated vapor entropy at 200 kPa. So exit is at superheated state. Okay, so exit condition is superheated. So we have to go to the superheated table for pressure of 0.2 MPa. If you go to superheated table for pressure of 0.2 MPa, so for the entropy of 7.7642, you need to interpolate. So by interpolation, we will get, so your value may be slightly different, but I have obtained temperature to be 264.72 degree centigrade. Enthalpy is almost 3000 kilojoule per kg, 3000.000 something. So 3000 kilojoule per kg. And specific volume as 1.2325 meter cube per kg. Okay, this is what I obtained after interpolation from the superheated table for a pressure of 0.2 MPa and corresponding to entropy of 7.7642 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. So once we went to the superheated pressure table, 0.2 MPa pressure table, from there we had to calculate based on the, so let me just open once because we have time today. So first what we did is we went to 200 kilopascal pressure, okay, because that was the exit pressure, saturation table, and we verified that for 200 kilopascal pressure saturation table, the Sg value 7.1260, this value is Sg value is less than H2 value, so H2 is actually superheated. Okay, so after this we went to the superheated table for 200 kilopascal pressure, 0.2 MPa. This is the 200 kilopascal pressure table, 0.2 MPa. And we found that for 200 degree centigrade, entropy is 7.50. For 250 degrees, 7.70. For 300 degrees, it is 7.89. So our entropy was how much? Our entropy was 7.7642. So 7.7642 is between 7.70 and 7.89. So between 250 and 300. So we interpolated between 250 and 300 and obtained the temperature to be 264.72. Once we interpolated the temperature using the same interpolation, we found what is the enthalpy. So enthalpy will also be in between the two values. So enthalpy will be between 2970 and 3071. It actually came very close to 3000, and specific volume will be between 1.199 and 1.3164. So in my case, it came as 1.2325 meter cube per kg. Okay. So now using the first law of thermodynamics, H1 plus V1 square by 2 is equal to H2 plus V2 square by 2. Okay. So V1 is almost equal to 0 because it is stated that velocity is 0 at the inlet. So V2 is equal to root over 2 H1 minus H2. Okay. So 2 into H1 we have already calculated, if you remember, 3479.1. Okay. And H2 is 3000. So 2 into 3479.1 into 10 to the power 3 joule per kg Kelvin. So we are converting to joule because we are calculating using SI unit, minus 3000 into 10 to the power 3. So from this we get the exit velocity to be 978.9 meter per second. Okay. So once you know the exit enthalpy, you can calculate the exit velocity as 978.9 meter per second. So what was the question now? Exit area of the nozzle, then exit Mach number. Okay. So exit area of the nozzle A2 is equal to m dot by rho 2 V2. Okay. So because m dot is equal to rho 2 A2 V2. So A2 is equal to m dot by rho 2 V2. So m dot into, so rho 2 is 1 by specific volume. So 1 by V2. So I can write this as m dot into V2 by capital V2. Okay. So A2 is equal to 2.5. Mass flow rate is given as 2.5 kg per second. 2.5 into specific volume is we have already obtained 1.2325 divided by the velocity 978.9 meter per second. So we obtain the area to be 31.5 into 10 to the power minus 4 meter square. So A2 is equal to 31.5 centimeter square. Okay. So this is the exit area. Now to calculate the exit Mach number, we need to know we already know the exit velocity. We just need to know the exit speed of sound. Okay. So up to this point, we have not used any ideal gas law. If you see anything related to ideal gas, we have not used. We have not even taken the gamma value 1.3 or whatever. We have just used whatever are the thermodynamic properties. Okay, up to this point. Now, in a single step, you can very quickly get the exit Mach number if you use the ideal gas law. What will be the velocity? C2. C2 will be gamma root over gamma R T2. Okay. So T2 we already know. You have to convert to Kelvin. Okay. And gamma you can take 1.3 and R you can take 461.5. Okay. Based on universal gas constant. So I will come to the above portion later, but I can take C2 is equal to root over gamma R T2. Gamma is 1.3. R is equal to 0.4615 into 10 to the power 3. How did we calculate R? By dividing R bar by molecular weight of water vapor. Okay, because it is steam. Okay. And temperature is 537.72 Kelvin, which we have already calculated. 264.72, which is the same as 537.72 Kelvin. Okay. So if you calculate C2, it comes as 567.98 meter per second. And because the velocity has been already calculated as 978.9, we can calculate the Mach number to be V2 by C2, which is 1.723. Okay. In one line, we can calculate. So the alternate approach is not to use the ideal gas law, but to use the general expression of speed of sound. Okay. In the problem, if some problem comes like this in the exam, you should use the ideal gas law. Okay. No need to complicate it further because this needs a lot of interpolation and it actually leads to like significant amount of time is required for doing this type of interpolation. Anyway, we know that C square is equal to del P del rho at constant entropy. This we have already discussed long back. Okay, if you do not remember, C square is equal to del P del rho at normal constant entropy, and that is valid for any fluid, not ideal gas. It is valid for any fluid. It is not valid only for ideal gas. Okay, it is valid for any fluid. So we will be using this relation C square is equal to del P del rho at constant entropy. Okay. So for our case, we want to find C2. Okay. Exit speed of sound. Okay. I will keep these things open because it's slightly confusing. C2 is equal to root over del P del rho at constant entropy. Okay. Now del P del rho, I can take delta P near that point, okay, at the exit condition. So our exit pressure is 200 kPa. So I can take a delta P around 200 kPa and I can take a delta rho around the exit specific volume. Okay, so exit specific volume is 1.2325. So around that point I can take a delta rho. Okay, steps, larger steps. Okay, so I can write this del P del rho as delta P by delta rho. Okay, at 0.2. Delta P by delta rho at 0.2. So what is delta P at 0.2? So using the nearest values that are known to us. So our P is 200 kPa. So the nearest value below 200 kPa is 100 kPa and the nearest value above 200 kPa is 300 kPa. Okay, as per this table. So the nearest value below 200 kPa is 100 kPa and the nearest value above 200 kPa is 300 kPa. Okay, So I can take a delta P across 200 kPa in terms of 100 and 300 kPa. Okay, so 300 kPa minus 100 kPa. This is my delta P. And for the same entropy, because we are calculating for constant entropy, for the same entropy, S is equal to S2, I can interpolate what should be the specific volume at 300 kPa and what should be the specific volume at 100 kPa. Okay, for the same entropy of 7.7642 from the table, from the same entropy of 7.7642 from the table, I can interpolate what should be the specific volume. For example, 7.7642 specific volume will be between 1.93 and 2.17 for 0.1 MPa. Okay, between 1.93 and 2.17. So that is what we obtain. We obtain that. Where is it? 2.09. Okay. Similarly, at 300 kPa for 7.76, for 300 kPa we obtain in between these 2 points. So between 0.875 and 0.953. So we will obtain something between 0.875 and 0.953. So 0.9024. Okay. So this is delta rho 1 by delta 1 by V. So delta 1 by V is equal to 1 by V at 300 kPa minus 1 by V at 100 kPa. Okay. So delta P by delta rho we can approximate as what I have written here. So this will give us a value of C2 is equal to 563.2 meter per second. Okay. So I have written also explanation. Delta P is taken for the point P2 equal to 200 kPa by considering the nearest values given in the table, which are 300 kPa and 100 kPa. The V values are interpolated for S equal to S2. What happened? Why there is a sound? You guys can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. The V values are interpolated for S is equal to S2 at 300 kPa and 100 kPa. So using a complicated way, we have found that C2 is equal to 563.2 meter per second. What is the significance of this finding? We have not used ideal gas laws for this. Okay. So this is slightly different from the ideal gas value. Ideal gas value was 567.98, but still quite close. Okay, here also we have taken large approximation because our delta P is very inaccurate and delta rho is very inaccurate. We have taken a very large margin. Actually, this should be dP and d rho, very near to the actual points. But our limits are very large. Okay, because we do not have any nearer values in the table. If we had 219, if we had 199 and 201, we would have taken 201 and 199. And our calculation would have been much more accurate. Okay. So anyway, so using this process, C2 is 563.2 meter per second and Mach number is 1.738 for this. But you should use the alternate method. This is just to illustrate that this also is possible. So this concludes the nozzles part. Any questions? Similar type of problems you should be able to solve, and you should also know. Intuitively, you should have that feel that how the temperature, pressure, and density varies in a nozzle, like from the inlet to the outlet. And that intuition you will develop when you study and think about it for a little bit. Still some time is left. I will start the next part because anyway we are taking so many extra classes. Any questions?
No, sir.
So if there are no questions, please read that part. I will also give you some problem sets which will have some problems which you can solve, and I will give the corresponding solutions. This part is also present in the book by Chengelbos, and you can read the parts which are relevant for us, not the entire thing, the initial part from the chapter of Chengelbos, thermodynamics book. And I don't recommend to solve the problems given in Pekenag or other books because there are a lot of inaccuracies for this part, for the nozzle part. Okay, so better to go through the thermodynamics book, which is much more accurate. So now we will move on to one of the most important section for us, which is the turbine blading part. So nozzles are also part of the turbines. but nozzles are the fixed part of the turbine. Now we want to study about the moving part of the turbine, which are the moving blades. Okay, and as you have seen in the like a few days back, quite a few days back now, in the video, that turbines have stages like this. So each of the stage is known as a, like, each of the stages consists of a rotor and a each of the stage consists of a rotor and a stator. So all the rotors are mounted on a shaft, okay, on a diaphragm which is mounted on a shaft, and all of them rotate together with the shaft at the same angular velocity. So each rotor consists of multiple blades, as you can see here, connected together, means mounted over the hub and connected at the end through a strip which is known as shroud. Okay. So this is there to avoid bending of the strips. Okay, we will discuss all these things in later classes. First, we will go into the mathematical details. Later, we will discuss about losses in turbines, governing, all these things, even other details of turbines, because turbines are very important. So anyway, and why is there this size discrepancy of the blades of the turbine? Why is this? Which one are the stages after the combustion chamber, or like which one is the high, which one are the high pressure stages and which one are the low pressure stages? Left hand side is high pressure, or from which side is steam coming in this case?
Left hand side.
Left hand side. So how can you say that? I means on what basis?
The pressure will gradually decrease, so the size should also increase.
Correct. You can speak more confidently. Pressure will gradually decrease along the flow. So if pressure decreases, the specific volume will increase. Means density will decrease, specific volume will increase. So for the same mass flow rate, the volume flow rate will increase. So you need a larger cross-sectional area. So the cross-sectional area increases when you go from high pressure to low pressure. Okay. So in between each of these rotor blades are the nozzles or stator blades. Okay. So each like after each of these circular disc, there will be another disc which has a fixed blade, mounted on it. Then again one of these discs, again another disc which has fixed blade mounted on it. So the fixed blades are mounted on the casing. Okay, that's why it is not shown here. It is part of the casing. Again another view, and like this it is put in the casing. And each stage independently consists of a set of stationary blades or nozzles and a rotating blades or rotor. Okay. So in this case, you can see large number of stages, means the rotor for large number of stages. So each of them will also have their corresponding stators. Okay. These are the rotating blades, stationary blades. So anyway, I hope you get the idea. And the video is also there. If you remember, which I had shown, it is a very nice video. You should again go through it. It has been uploaded in the portal. It will give you a very clear picture because it's been quite a few days after our last discussion about turbine stages. So there are two main types of turbines. Okay, I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, there are two main types of turbines. Means within steam turbines. Obviously, there are many types of turbines like gas turbines, steam turbines, so many other but within steam turbines, we can classify the steam turbines into two types. Okay, one is known as impulse turbine and one is known as reaction turbine. What is the difference? In impulse turbine, the entire pressure drop occurs only in the stators or nozzles. Okay. So what do we mean by pressure drop? Whenever there is pressure drop in the nozzle, the flow is accelerated, right? Pressure drop means the pressure or enthalpy drops in that section, and it gets converted, whatever is the energy gets converted to kinetic energy. So in impulse turbine, the entire kinetic energy is generated only in the nozzles, and the rotor blades use that kinetic energy to convert the kinetic energy to work. Okay. Whereas in the reaction turbine, pressure drop occurs both in the nozzle and as well as in the moving blade. Okay. So in reaction turbine, there is generation of kinetic energy in the nozzle, like in the previous case. However, there is also generation of further kinetic energy in the moving blade. Means enthalpy even gets reduced further in the moving blades also. So moving blades also act like nozzles. Okay, nozzles are like nozzles, but moving blades are also shaped like nozzles. So in the moving blades, there is further generation of kinetic energy, which again is converted to work. Okay, so that is the difference. Okay, and it creates a reaction on the moving blades. That's why it is known as reaction turbine. Okay, so we'll start with the impulse turbine. Today I will just introduce you to the velocity diagram, and in the next class we will continue the discussion on the impulse turbine. So for studying the velocity diagram, first you need to understand what is the flow pattern. Okay, what is the flow pattern in the stator and rotor blades. So if I have a nozzle and a set of moving blades, okay, multiple nozzles will be arranged. Let me see whether I have a better diagram. Okay, I think this is a better diagram. So the velocity, the flow will come through a nozzle. There will be set of nozzles like this. Okay, so I am showing a cross section, cut section from the blades at some mid position. Okay, so you have a blade. I cannot show you here directly. You have to imagine the case that the blade is mounted on the shaft. The shaft is along the direction on your screen from the left to the right hand side. Okay, and the blades are mounted on the shaft and are rotating out of the screen and going inside the screen again. Okay, so we have taken a cut section along the screen. So in between we are showing the blades. So what we have done is we have cut somewhere along here. Okay, we have cut the blades somewhere along here, so that you get we take a look at the middle position of the blades and the nozzles. Okay, somewhere between the tip of the blade and the root of the blade, we have taken a plane to study this in 2D. Okay, so the tip of the blade is known as basically it is rotor tip or tip of the blade, and root is known as the root section, means the starting section or half section, and in between we have a mean diameter. So you can assume that we are calculating everything at the mean diameter, like halfway between the tip and the root. Okay. So the flow looks like this. So the flow comes in through a nozzle, goes out at a higher velocity, then it impinges on the moving blades. So the cross section of the moving blades look like this. Again, I will go back to our diagram here. So multiple moving blades are there, and you can imagine that the cross section will look like a bucket or a like shaped like this. Okay, U-shaped structures. So the flow impinges on the moving blades, moves around the moving blades, comes out from the other direction, and because of the change in direction of the flow, momentum transfer occurs to the moving blades and the blades move forward. In 2D it looks like it is moving forward, in 3D it is rotating. Okay, the blade is rotating. Then the flow comes out in this direction and enters another set of nozzles. Okay, in the second set of nozzle, again it increases, like the kinetic energy was reduced in the moving blades, so again the kinetic energy is increased in the nozzle, and again the flow comes out at high velocity, and again it impinges on another set of moving blade. Again the kinetic energy gets decreased, and again the blade moves forward. Like this it goes on for multiple stages. Okay, so you have to imagine one set of blade that the flow comes in from one direction along the blade and moves around the blade and goes out along the blade on the other direction, and the flow has to enter smoothly the blade. Otherwise, if it impinges at a certain angle, then there will be a lot of turbulence and lot of energy will be lost. Okay, it will just create frictional energy or heat. So the flow should always enter smoothly along the length, and the flow to enter the flow smoothly along the length, you have to calculate the relative velocity very accurately, because through the nozzle the flow is coming. When the flow is coming, we know what is the absolute velocity of the flow. However, for the moving blades, the blades are moving forward with a certain velocity itself. Okay, so from the point of view of the blades, the flow is coming in another direction. Okay, the relative velocity is different. So the relative velocity should be such that the flow enters the moving blades smoothly, not the absolute velocity. The relative velocity should be such that the flow enters the moving blades smoothly. So the relative velocity should be aligned with the direction, not the tip of the moving blades. Okay, not the absolute velocity. So absolute velocity we have to calculate based on the relative velocity. That is the important thing that we have to understand from here. Okay. So again, drawing the same diagram but in a different orientation. Okay, please study this diagram before the next class. It's already uploaded in the portal. Please go through it, because this is very important, because based on this only we have to solve all the problems in the next 2 classes. Okay, and I'll try to understand everything regarding moving blades. This diagram and the second diagram, these are the most important diagrams for calculus, and these type of problems you can expect in the exam also. Okay, what we are going to study, because this is a very important part. So the flow comes in from the nozzle. I will just finish after describing this diagram. Okay, flow comes in with a velocity v1 from the nozzle, very high velocity v1 at an angle alpha 1. Angle alpha 1 with respect to the direction of the moving blade vb. Okay, vb is the velocity of the moving blade. So the blade is moving forward in the 2D plane with a velocity vb at that instant. And with respect to that, the angle of the incoming flow, absolute angle is alpha 1, absolute velocity is v1. However, the relative velocity is different. Okay, so relative velocity is vr1 and relative angle is beta 1. So how is vr1 and v1 related? Vr1, vector addition of vr1 and vb is equal to v1. So let me will finish soon. So this is vb. Okay, this is vb and this is vr1. So the vector addition of vr1 and vb is equal to v1. Okay. So this is the blade velocity vb and this is the relative velocity vr1. So if we know v1 and vb and alpha 1, we can find out vr1 and beta 1. Okay, so this is beta 1 is known as blade angle and alpha 1 is known as flow angle. Okay, blade inlet angle beta 1, flow inlet angle alpha 1. v1 is known as absolute velocity at inlet, vr1 is known as relative velocity at inlet. Okay, similarly at the outlet, the flow will go out smoothly from the surface of the turbine rotor blade. So its angle will be aligned with the angle of the rotor blade. Okay, if the angle is beta 2, the flow angle means the relative velocity angle will be beta 2. Okay, so beta 2 plus vb, vb is still vb at the exit also. Everywhere the velocity of the blade is vb. Okay, it is not changing wherever is the location, because it's a rigid blade, its velocity is vb. So at the exit also the velocity is vb. So vr2 plus vb will vector addition of that will give us the actual velocity v2. Okay, the absolute velocity. If you are standing outside the blade, you will see that the velocity is v2. But if you are standing on the blade, you will see that the velocity is vr2. Okay, so the actual angle is alpha 2 and the relative angle is beta 2. Actual velocity is v2, relative velocity is vr2. Okay, so v1 is the absolute velocity at inlet, v2 is the absolute velocity at the outlet, vr1 is the relative velocity at inlet, vr2 is the relative velocity at exit, vb is the blade velocity, beta 1 is the blade inlet angle, beta 2 is known as blade outlet angle, alpha 1 is known as flow inlet angle, alpha 2 is known as flow outlet angle. Okay, So based on this, we will continue our discussion in the next class. Just go through this and try to understand this part.